Okay, so we will get started. Thanks for everyone who's been able to jump on and join us. As a reminder, this is being recorded. I think you all had the prompt when you first logged in on that. So obviously this is hosted by Arlington Soccer Club, but I do know we've got people from across the country. I see some familiar names across the pond, and also I think from where Liam is currently working. So to give Liam the introduction that I think he deserves, I'm sure you've all seen the bio that got sent out, but Liam's got a wealth of knowledge in the game. He's sort of been at all different levels, working at different clubs, and just to name a few, he was working at Manchester City Academy in England, and then he was at Preston North End Academy as an academy coach there. He's also been a technical director at Kingston United out in Canada, and he's been head of football development for My Sports Academy in the UAE. To add to that, he hasn't just got the experience, he's also got the qualifications to go with it. He's a UEFA A licensed coach, which, as many of you may know, is one of the hardest and highest qualifications to actually, go on and get. So, as we know, Liam has pretty much got it all. Not only is he a good coach, great coach, but he's also a good friend of mine. So, Liam, thank you for the times that you've put in, and I know it's a little bit late from where you're coming from, but I appreciate it. So I'll pass it over to you, and I'm looking forward to this one.
Thanks, Paige. That was some introduction. I hope I don't let anyone down here. My first point that I was going to make, guys, was usually when I jump on these kind of coach education calls, I ask if anyone requires a translator, but obviously a lot of you know Paige, you definitely don't need a translator because my accent I don't think is as strong as it, Paige. So you should be okay. But any questions you've got kind of throughout, just fire them at me. In terms of, I want this to be almost an open forum. I've left probably about 15 to 20 minutes at the end just for a little Q&A. So please build up a portfolio of questions, and kind of no question is a stupid question. And if it is, I'll just tell you it is. So we'll kind of go with that setup and build from there. I like to talk, so I will ramble a little bit, but I will always revert back to the topic that is the importance of age-appropriate coaching. There is a little bit of a subtopic in the fact that we'll talk briefly about 1v1s. This is something, I think, the importance of age-appropriate coaching is something that we could do 6 versions of this Zoom and still have 6 different variations. But I think the most important part today is what I'm going to be speaking about. Is from my experience across a number of years. It isn't necessarily biblical. It's stuff that's worked for me. It's stuff that I've seen work, not just the lowest kind of level and recreational, but I've seen it work right at the top within the professional setup. So I've seen it. Again, don't take it as biblical. There's ways as coaches, as we all know, we can adapt things and maybe sometimes steal things and adjust things. So please use this as just a tool. So as Paige said, just briefly, if I can, hopefully the screen's on for everyone. Paige, is it on? If everyone can see it, can't they? I don't want to go on about myself. I don't think I need to. Paige is obviously just giving me that introduction, which I appreciate. But like she mentioned, I've got kind of a wealth of experience. I think more importantly, from a grassroots level, and in terms of grassroots, I'm talking about grassroots in the UK. We're talking about kind of recreational soccer. I've worked at quite a relatively large club in Canada, with the recreational side right up to the travel team side, if you will. But I found it the most impact I had was at the recreational level within Canada. And there's a number of things that we built over there, not just myself, but my coaching team, that they've continued to grow since I departed. And it's been a pleasure to watch from the outside looking in. So I've got that experience in on that side of the pond, if you will. I've done some work in the United Arab Emirates, which is, can be a bit of a culture shock, but football is a huge sport over there. So that was an interesting role I had. And then obviously working in the UK, I've actually spent a little bit of time in Australia too. So I've dotted around, and the experiences I've had from these countries and these different cultures have kind of molded my ideas, if you will, and what kind of works and what doesn't. So the first thing I wanted to speak about was a question, kind of a double-edged question to you guys, and you don't have to answer it now, but I'd like you to think about this question as we chat, or as I ramble on throughout the next kind of 45 to 50 minutes. What is your philosophy? And I think if we're talking about the importance of, age appropriate coaching, and I'm asking the question, what is age appropriate coaching? You have to have some idea and some feelings of and some development of what a philosophy is and what your philosophy is as a coach. Whether that be, a volunteer coach who's a parent who just loves soccer and loves working with the kids, or it might be that you're a coach who's embarking on a journey that you'd like to be a full-time, professional coach at some stage. You may even be a full-time coach now, but whatever your role is within soccer, I'm going to try and use the word soccer as much as I can. The reason you must have one of these is because it's got to be true to yourself. It's got to be a little bit about your identity and, of course, your club's identity. Now, knowing a number of you people on the call will be doing some form of coaching for Arlington. I'm sure there is a club philosophy in place, but that's something you will follow, but you'll also have your little niche and your little bit to add to that. So I kind of drafted something up a while ago. I'm actually currently back out in the UAE at the moment. I don't really need to go into too much detail, but I'm in the process of building a club kind of it's relatively low, and we're looking at bringing a number of different age bands, and I'll build into that a little bit later. But our philosophy currently at this moment in time is to create a competitive and disciplined environment that allows players to thrive and develop under the guidance of highly qualified football people. All players have the opportunity to be creative within the framework and should feel confident to try new skills and techniques. We never stifle creativity, and we don't accept the answer yes. We challenge it to know why it's a yes. And that's something I developed probably about 2 or 3 months ago when I kind of joined and came into the role that I'm currently in. And I think it's important to understand that at the end of every session that you do, I pretty much near on guarantee, if you were to ask the kids, did they enjoy the session? The first thing they'll say is yes. And whether they enjoyed the session or not is a completely different matter. They'll say yes because you're the coach first and foremost. You're the adult secondly. And thirdly, they don't want you to hear anything else. They might go home and complain. They might go home and be absolutely delighted and over the moon. They could go home with a number of feelings, but they'll always just say yes. I figured this out, many years ago. I used to ask my players, at the end of a session, did you enjoy the session? And they go away and say, yeah. And I was thinking to myself, well, I want to know why they enjoyed it. And if they didn't enjoy it, I want to know why, because I want to, help and support their development. So I got into the habit, and it's a difficult habit to get into, but I got into the habit of asking that question and then always asking after the yes, why? Why was it a good session? Tell me 1 or 2 things that you enjoyed in the session. Tell me 1 or 2 things that, maybe you didn't quite enjoy in the session. And to be honest with you, it actually opened my eyes a little bit, because I wasn't the superstar, fantastic, phenomenal coach that maybe my ego thought I was, because there was a few honest truths within there, and there still is to this day. And I will continue to ask that question after every, if not most, sessions, because you need to know the truth. Because if you find out the truth from the player, they're the player in the session. If they're with you for 60 minutes or 90 minutes of a session, no doubt there's going to be times where they're having a great time. They're probably scoring goals. They're playing with the teammates. They're loving life. There's going to be times where they, miss a sitter and the teammate's giving them a little bit of a pasting for it. And before you know it, their session goes downhill. Their confidence goes, and that's something you can affect as a coach. So I think that would be my first initial tip to you all on the call is don't just accept yes when you ask how a session was. There was one kind of damning moment that I had when I was back at Manchester City a number of years ago. I had a mentor that I kind of worked under, and he was our technical director at the time. And he was fantastic in the way he worked, but he gave me a piece of advice, and that advice was, we were lucky enough to have changing rooms at the time. Not every club will, and I get that. But if you do have access to a changing room before or after training, this is a great tool just to help you as a coach. I took in a little batch of Post-it notes. I don't know whether the Post-it notes are called anything else in the US, but if they are, maybe Paige can translate that. But I took in a little batch of Post-it notes and left 18 pens or 18 pencils next to them in the changing room. And at the end of the session, when we went in, I said to the players, it was quite ruthless, under 16 girls. If you've worked with under 16 girls before, they're not shy and they'll get stuck into you. But I said basically, I want you to list one thing. I think it was one thing at the time. One thing that you enjoyed about the session, and one thing you didn't enjoy about the session. You had to have one of each. I don't want any names on those post-it notes. Just honesty. Anyway, the girls writ whatever they writ down. They put it on the wall within the changing room, and then obviously got themselves dressed and off they went home. I waited half an hour and then went in. Probably should have went in with a couple of bottles of wine, because could have been alcoholic after I read some of the stuff. But it was truthful. It was honest. I didn't know who'd said it, and I think us as coaches, if there's going to be times where you don't want to hear stuff, but I thought that was a really good technique that I learned from a mentor of mine that I always look to pass on. But you've got to be willing to hear the truth and read the truth. And there's going to be some fantastic things written on there, but there's also going to be some not so fantastic things, but they're the things that help you as a coach. So yeah, I think the big thing there is build a philosophy. If we're talking about working with players of all ages, especially young players, make sure you've got an idea about what you're doing. I'm just going to give you an idea of how I break down the club that I'm currently working at, our academy, our youth setup. And this is similar or very similar to that of the UK and Europe, but it links really nicely to obviously the topic we're working on today, in terms of age appropriate. So we have kind of 4 areas to our club. The pre-academy, which is under 3 to under 6. We have the foundation phase, which is U7 to U11. And I am aware that I think over that side of the world, you do use kind of the year groups as well, I think, at some clubs, but I think this is clear enough. The youth development phase is under 12 to under 16. And then if you're lucky enough, the professional development phase will be U17 to U23, and then obviously beyond that would be first team. But I'm going to concentrate, I think, a little bit more on kind of these 2, if not these 3, because I assume these are the age groups that a number of us will be working in. And to be honest with you, they're the age groups, especially for me, the foundation phase, which excites me as a coach the most. When we're talking about, developing players, developing people mainly, and making things age appropriate, little things spring to mind. So if we talk about the pre-academy and these age groups of U3 to U6, these are ages where you learn by games. In some cases, there might be silly games. I think we've all played little games like Cops and Robbers, Mario Kart. I think there's one doing the rounds at the moment, which is to do with the movie Frozen. We've all got great minds, and we all watch kiddie movies from time to time and kiddie programs. I'm sure we do, and we might have sons and daughters or nieces and nephews. You can be as creative, or what I should say is you should be as creative as humanly possible when you're working with those younger age groups. And when we talk about age appropriate, it's got to relate to what they understand. You cannot expect a U3 to U6 boy or girl to understand the offside trap or to understand the 4-4-2 formation. But what you can maybe expect them to understand is The Lion King, or another Disney movie. Lion King might be showing my age there, but those sorts of things too. So that's something I would certainly push in terms of the pre-academy stuff. Learn through games, learn through activities, and again, learn through fun. And I think the word fun should fall through all phases, to be honest. I think some people would argue otherwise, but that's just my opinion. The foundation phase, U7 to U11, I've put an example at the bottom here of, this is a syllabus that I've developed for a previous club. And it's just to give you an example of the detail that's within a syllabus. And I'm not saying it by any stretch of the imagination this should be every club's ethos, or this isn't what every club should do. Every club's got their own vision, every club's got their own director, coach and technical director, and they're the roles that people do their things. But I was employed to bring a syllabus to a club a while ago, and that's what I brought to the table. And what we talked about massively with the technical director of that club was I know what the U90, U11 age groups need and require to develop. I know that through experience and through going on my coaching licenses and working with a number of clubs I've worked with. But how we implement that and bring that to life is part of the technical director's role too, alongside me producing this syllabus. So within that syllabus for the foundation phase, there's a theme, there's a main theme, and it is literally as simple as attacking. For week 1 of this syllabus, the theme for the boys and girls within the U90, U11 group he had here, but for U70, U11, for argument's sake, foundation phase, the theme would be attacking. So that's what the kids need to know that week. So if you're training on a Monday and a Wednesday evening for an hour, your theme this week, boys or girls, we're working on attacking. And that's all you need to tell them for now, and for me, whenever I've used that word attacking or offensive or whatever it needs to be, it excites kids. Attacking to me, first couple of things that come to mind are goals, shooting, maybe big long switches of play, lots of dribbling, loads of things going on towards goal. So if that's my first view of what attacking is, you need to have a think as a coach when you design your session. What comes to mind for your players? Do they, when they hear the word attacking, what do they think of? For me, I think goals. So I'm automatically trying to get as many goals set up as possible for my session, because that's what the kids are thinking about. I will also usually add a sub theme, and that sub theme is mainly for you, the coach. The theme is attacking, but your sub theme might be, for example, this one for this week was 1v1 pressure from the front and behind. So it was how you as an attacker can go beyond someone who's coming from the side or closing you down from behind. So that was something for that you would internally work on, but you didn't need to talk too much about to the players. You just need to let them know it's attacking. And then a big part of within those 90-minute sessions that this club did and this team did, we spoke about forward moves and changes of direction, because forward moves and changes of direction are so key in those younger age groups. You should be able to, and we broke down 6 forward moves and 7 changes of direction moves that all of the players should be required to do from the ages of U7 and still when they get to U23, obviously at different levels, but they should be learning right from the start. So the forward moves that they agreed on were step overs, right and left, scissors, Maradona turn, sole roll push, and a Messi dip. They're all moves that are forward moves, which obviously is self-explanatory. Changes of direction moves, which obviously incorporate balance and coordination as well. Your drag backs, step over turns left and right, Cruyff turn, inside cut, outside cut, and the hook turn. And they were just moves and changes of direction that this club wanted, and they were part of their ethos. So we included that. Now these moves and skills, if you will, were practiced for 10 minutes every single session from U7 to U11 and U12 to U16 until they were mastered. And they never will be mastered, but this is ball mastery, and it's so important at those younger age groups, especially the kids are comfortable with a football at their feet. And then the big thing here was, again, this is for coaches, not really for players. This is for you guys as coaches. The 4 corners. We talk about the 4-corner model a lot. You've probably heard it, especially having Paige on board at your club. But the technical side of the game, we try to keep it really, really simple. Dribbling to beat an opponent, dribbling into space. The tactical side of the game, you probably don't go into too much tactical detail, if anything, to be honest, at those younger age groups. But they are simple things like, can you dominate in that 1v1 situation? What is risk and reward within that scenario? The physical side of the game, if we're talking about 1v1s in here, the physical side of the game, it's actually hidden fitness or 1v1, because there's 2 sides to the game, obviously attacking and defending. But if you're working in a 1v1 for 1 minute, you're going to be out of breath because you're grafting. You really are working hard, depending on the size of the space you're working in. And then the psychological side of the game as well within that session. Can you create a session that requires decision making? Can those players be making decisions regularly? Can they be problem solving? Because if you've got a young player at the age of 7, 8 or 9 who can problem solve, that's that's pretty impressive, and you can certainly develop that within your sessions. So yeah, just something to think about. And then a number of the final thing there was the medium-term learning objectives within the sessions that were delivered at this club. The big thing was, and the big thing it always is in development, is it's not just about that one session. It's about what we can achieve within the next month, what we can achieve within the next 6 months, what we can achieve within the next year, and so on and so forth. So you delivering a session just for delivering a session, you know, the kids will have a little bit of fun, of course, but that's as far as it goes. If you want to develop players, then you know there has to be a bit more of a plan in place. So that would be a U9 to U11 foundation phase. And then the U12 to U16, and hopefully now you can see it might be quite small, and I will send this out to Paige so she can forward it on. But the theme is a little bit more intense now when you get to U12 to U16, because you're talking a little bit more technically and tactically. So that theme for week 14 for them was connect, combine, creativity in the final third, which, if you go back to the U9 to U11, is just attacking. It's attacking with a little bit more terminology from us as coaches. Connect, combine, creativity in the final third. So the way you word things is so important as a coach. And I think that comes to the next slide that I've got there, is the language that we use. If we talk about age appropriate coaching, if your language isn't age appropriate, then you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle massively. I think I had a bit of an eye-opener a couple of years ago with some under 8s I was working with, under 8s boys team. This was in where was it? This was back in the UK. Really talented bunch of boys, but in terms of positions on the pitch, they didn't quite understand where to be. And I was listening to a coach in a game that we played against on the weekend. We had a game on I think it was a Sunday morning, cold, wet, and windy. I wouldn't recommend England, especially in November. And I'm playing against this coach, and he's referring to the positions like he's playing on FIFA 2000 and whatever, 22 or whatever it is. And he's calling the centre mid the CDM and all, and the kids are responding to it, and there was this little buzz about it. So I made it my and I certainly wasn't getting that buzz out of the players I had. So I made it kind of my prerogative to go away and research FIFA. I'm terrible at the game. Shocking. I don't play on the PlayStation, but I just kind of reached out to a few people that I knew did, drafted down some notes and tried to start to incorporate this FIFA terminology, if you will, into the sessions and into the games. And it was a hit, because the kids are all playing FIFA. So if you can relate it to FIFA, for me, that's age appropriate. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And I would also say, don't let anyone tell you there's anything wrong with it. That was age appropriate for those boys. They understood it more than the information maybe I was giving them in terms of the positions. And we got on like a house on fire for the following 6 months. So that's just one thing. And you've got to think about understanding, what does a child understand? I think the number system has been incorporated at a number of academies in England, and the number system is just giving a position a number, because I'm sure you all know, when we're coaching, especially on a match day, you might go and ask let's say we're playing 11v11, under 14s or under 15s, you might send your substitute on and go and tell him to play as a right wing back. But when he goes and plays up for the under 16s the following week, that new coach, or maybe he goes to play for the high school the following week, that other coach might tell him the same position, but might give it a different name, an outside back or a right back or whatever. There's numerous names for different positions. And I found that really does confuse players. And when we're talking about age appropriate, I think it's really important we come down to their level, and the numerical system you can devise is relatively easy in terms of your goalkeeper's number 1. You can call him your goalkeeper, everyone knows that, but you've got your number 1, your right back or your right-sided defender or your right wing, whatever you want to call him, is your number 2. It's pretty simple. Go and play as a number 2. Your 2 centre-backs, which could divide opinion, in the way it is, but it's more the Dutch model, would be the 3 and the 4, the 2 central defenders. You could go 4 and 5 if that's your preference, but 3 and 4 would be your 2 centre backs, and 5 would be your left back. And then you basically off from right to left, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's pretty difficult to mess up, to be honest. Your 6 would sit in midfield if you're playing a 4-3-3, for example. Your 8 and your 10 will play just ahead as the other central midfielders. Your 7 and 11 would be your wingers, 7 to the right, 11 to the left, and then your number 9 up top. And showing those sorts of visuals, and I think I'll come on to the visuals in a second. Showing those sorts of visuals are huge for young players. They really, really are. So I would push that number system, and I'd certainly push, especially if you're working with younger players, the FIFA side of things too, because they're relatable things to young players, and if they relate to it, then they're going to relate to you a little bit more, and that's huge too. A last thing that I would mention, again, I'm going slightly off topic here, but I think this is important to mention too, is when you're working with younger players, I find it massively important. And let me just flip that. I find it massively frustrating, actually, when I have coaching staff that don't show an interest in our players. I think it's hugely important that when a player turns up to a training session, you make that extra effort to find out how his day was, or how her day was. What is she up to on a weekend, or what what party is the 8-year-old going to, which birthday party is he going to, and then follow up the following week when you see them at the next session. Little Max, how was little Johnny's birthday on the weekend? Did you enjoy it? It really goes a long way. It's a huge thing, and it, in a kid's life, where there's times where they can certainly be under a little, there might be struggles in the household, struggles in their actual lives. When they come to soccer, that's their relief for a lot of kids. So you're that role model, you having that little bit of TLC and asking a simple question, but following up. And listen, I've got the memory of a goldfish. I'll be completely honest with you, and Paige will back that up. But I would always make a note after a session. I've asked little Johnny, go on, make sure on Tuesday when I see him, how the birthday party was, and it's just another little tip, a tip to throw in. It helps me massively. Listen, it might not help you, but I'm just putting it out there. So the question: what is age appropriate coaching? $1 million question. There's so much to it, but I've tried to break it down for you. And like I said, I'll send this on to Paige, and she can send it out to you. But I think the first thing for me that springs to mind is know your audience. Like I said before, I broke down the club that I currently work at into 4 areas. So if I know I'm working with the U8s tonight, I know that I'm going to have to build my session slightly different to that if I was going to deliver a session to the under 12s or 13s, just because of knowledge, first and foremost, soccer knowledge of the players, but also the size of the pitch dimensions come into practice. How big's the working area I've got tonight to train? What is the topic tonight? Like I mentioned before, if it's attacking with the under 8, I'm going to try and get as many goals together as I can, because I want to make it as fun and exciting as possible. But if it's a defending topic, you can still get the goals out, because who's to say when we're doing a defensive topic, the attackers can't have a little bit of fun with it? You can be coaching the defenders, but there can still be an end goal for those defenders. Defender wins the ball off the attacker, then goes to score a goal. You can concentrate on the defending all you like, and that bit you can really hit home with. But they can still have a little bit of fun too. So I would certainly bear that in mind. Understanding what makes a session fun and what makes a session development driven. And I popped underneath there, can the above be both? Can it be a fun session and development driven? I believe it can. But if you're working with those really younger age groups, fun is top of the billboard for me all the time. How can I make it fun? How can I make it enjoyable? How can I make that player drive it to training? And by drive it, I'm not saying they're driving a car to training. I'm saying how can I make that kid, that boy or that girl, be knocking on the door in the house to mum or dad, get me to training. I need to be at training. How do I do that? I've got to find ways. And how do I get that kid leaving with a smile on the face of those younger age groups? Because that's how you develop the love of the game. And there's various ways. I'll give you one example. I usually start especially with the little ones under 7s, under 8s that I currently work with now. Great groups, two great groups of boys, and I set up mini 3v3 games for the arrival. So when they arrive, straight into teams, 3v3. And initially, when I got to the club that I'm currently at, players would just turn up at 5 p.m. on the dot, and it really irritated me for about a week. So I was trying to figure ways on how to get these kids here early. We set these 3v3 pitches up, and now they know there's a game as soon as they arrive with the friends. They've been rocking up at 25 to 5, 20 to 5, and playing for 20 minutes before we even get the session underway. And it's brilliant. It's their rules, no referee, which can be detrimental sometimes if you've turned your back for a second, but you've got to trust them at times. And that for me is a game changer. And it's certainly worked for us at our club. And those players are wanting to be at the session as soon as possible. So that's just a little one for you. But the question, like I said, can they both be both? For me, it can be. We want to develop players. You want to make players better. Development doesn't happen in one session, but development happens over a course of a number of sessions, and a bit of consistency alongside that. So, whatever you're doing, whatever you're planning within your sessions, can you replicate that over the coming weeks? And I think that's the importance of a technical syllabus as well, and having that implemented too. But I think you can really take ownership of that as a coach. So what is age-appropriate coaching again? I broke it down back into those 4 areas of the club I currently work in. So we've got the pre-academy, like I mentioned before, U3 to U6. The foundation phase, U7 to U11, the YDP, youth development phase, which is U12 to U16, and then the professional development phase, which is 17 and above. So for pre-academy, what should they be working on? What should you be thinking about? For me, I've wrote there an introduction to football. It's an intro to football. How do I get these kids to love football? How do I get them to be excited about football? It's all about enjoyment, all about excitement, all about learning through fun games. And I mentioned that before. So if you can incorporate those into your sessions, that would be age appropriate for me, and that would tick a massive box. The foundation phase, U7s to U11s, learning the basic techniques. We don't need to go overboard with anything, but I think it's a great opportunity to learn these basic changes of direction, master the football, enjoy the ball mastery sessions, little skills and drills, a little bit of juggling doesn't go amiss as well. And dribbling's a big thing, I think, at these age groups. Intro to balance and coordination with the ball at your feet. And I've said embrace selfishness. This divides opinion massively. Not just the club I'm at now, but the clubs I've been at in the past. But when I was 7 years old, in fact, when I was 9 or 10 years old, I was selfish. I didn't want to pass the ball to anybody. I had no interest. It was me against the world. And that's still how kids think at those age groups. So I always think when I step in and I watch an under 6s or under 7s or under 8s team practicing passing patterns and passing for 30 or 40 minutes of a session, is that really going to bring a kid back to a session? My opinion, I would say no. If you're going to practice these passing patterns and do some passing within your sessions for an extended period of time, you've got to make it realistic, and there's got to be some fun element in there, and there's got to be at the end of it a goal, an opportunity to play against a defender, whatever that be. But I would really push dribbling as much as possible within those early age groups, because, like I said before, are you gonna make a kid unselfish from one session? Definitely not. Especially in a game that there's one ball, and on the pitch in a 5v5, there's 10 of you. Only one of you can have the ball at any one time. So it kind of almost breeds selfishness, if you ask me. And we call it a team game. So at those younger age groups, again, divides opinion. But that's my opinion. I think dribbling is key at those early age groups. And just for the record, it's being recorded, this page, isn't it? Just for the record, in terms of, I'm not saying don't ever do passing, so don't misconstrue what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that, because passing's an integral part of the game of soccer and football. But what I am saying is have a little think about how you structure that within your session. The YDP then, the youth development phase, I think mastering the basics is important. We spoke about learning the basics at the foundation phase. We're now talking about mastering those basics, those, passing, finishing, dribbling, changes of direction, tackling, block tackling, all of these things, mastering them, improving key technical ability, further understanding of the game. And I think that's important. I'd be interested to know from a number of you on the call, how many of your players actually watch the game of football. How many of your players go home and watch a game? Because from my traveling over the past 5 or 6 years, I've been shocked, absolutely shocked by the amount of players that don't watch the game. So how can they understand the game if they don't watch it? I think it's massively important. I task my players with homework after every session. I don't call it homework because it sounds very schooly, but I task them with watching their favourite team. Even go on YouTube and type in your favourite player, Mbappe, Neymar. They're all accessible, but really push these kids to watch them. Obviously, there's a World Cup coming up relatively soon. Oh, and I've set an alarm because I know I don't shut up, so let me just snooze that alarm. But yeah, I really task these players with watching more football, watch more football, set the task, and then when they come back to the next session, ask them about it. Maybe get them to stand up in front of the group if they're brave enough. Everyone's got a character in the team. Get them to stand up and tell them who the favourite player was, what they did well in the game. Little things like that, they go a long way. It's really, really important to develop that passion for the game for me. But yeah, I would be interested. So keep that under your cap for the little Q&A at the end. Be interested to know if all of your players are watching lots and lots because it's accessible. It's very accessible. It's on most TV channels now. You can get it all over the world. It doesn't necessarily need to be the Premier League. It could be anything. Even just going to watch live games that are really lower level. Just watch the game. And again, I don't need to talk about the professional development phase too much, but that would be mastering the game, how to win, mastering all four corners of the game. There's an argument in some cases, winning over development over winning. I'm not going to get into that argument at all, but I will give you my opinion. I would certainly not have winning over development in this phase. I would keep that one away. For me, this is where the keyword learning comes into play. So that's certainly my opinion, and I don't budge from that up to U11. They'll learn to win through enjoying the game, and they'll learn to win with how you prepare them in your training sessions. They'll learn that anyway. It comes with it, but it shouldn't be win at all costs at those age groups, in my opinion. So just a couple of things that I think are important before I wrap up. Are things that we need. I think if we're going to deliver these age appropriate sessions, and this links to us as coaches, but also to the players too. I think that player coach respect is key. I think that's massively important. I think if you have that rapport with the player, then you're going to get a little bit more out of them. And that can be a 7-year-old, that can be a 17-year-old. I've got a player at the moment, an under 10. Technically gifted, wonderful footballer, absolute pleasure to watch. I'd pay to watch him play. He's that good on his day, but the problem is it's on his day. And if you don't have him wrapped around your finger in the sense that you've got him and you understand him, you'll never get the best out of him. And that's been a real task for me the last couple of months, is how do I achieve the best out of this player. He's struggled in games where we've played against far greater opposition, just because he's gone into a little bubble and doesn't want to know because he's not the best on the pitch. But then there's times where he's played against pretty decent sides and looked like a world beater. And I'm only talking about a 10-year-old, of course, which is quite crazy to talk about, but it's getting to understand, what he's like, what his habits are like, what his trends are. And it's almost, I think our role as coaches is almost, a psychology expert mixed in amongst another 25 other roles that we carry within the coaching job. This is the most underestimated thing when we talk about coaching, is enthusiasm. If you're not going to be enthusiastic, how are you going to get your kids to be enthusiastic? I think a lot of teams, this is not all teams, so don't quote me on this, but a lot of teams I watch that, are bereft of any energy, a little bit flat. Those teams are usually, not all the time, but usually, replicate the way the coaches. And I've seen it time and time again. If there's a coach who's, I'm not going to say animated, but there's a difference. Enthusiastic, very praises these young players, lets them make mistakes and helps them rather than, correct them aggressively. These are key details for me. We've got to be creative, I think, as coaches. But when I talk about the age appropriate stuff, we've got to allow we've got to allow these kids to be creative too. So yeah, we've got to be creative with how we get our message across. But I think it's massively important that we allow the players some time to try and be creative within sessions. It can't all be robotic. There's nothing worse for me than developing a robotic player who just goes from A to B, B to C, C to D. Because if they can't think for themselves, you'll end up being the puppet master. And there's nothing worse than being the puppet master, in my opinion, when I see those types of coaches. Can-do attitude, again, massively important. None of this, it's impossible. It's bollocks to that. It's not impossible if you're willing to figure things out and be intelligent, and try and work things out. At least try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you've got to work hard and try and get that result. And by result, I'm not talking about winning necessarily. I'm talking about a number of things: the development of that player, the understanding of that player. Does that player understand how to do a Cruyff turn, for example? Well, can I break it down? Well, if I can't demonstrate it because I'm not technically gifted myself, then is there another way? Yeah, there is. Go and get an iPad, or go and borrow an iPad and download the Cruyff turn off of YouTube and break it down slowly to the kid. Get on their level, because not every coach that I know is technically gifted to show it. Not everybody is. So there's different ways that you can do that. Find an older player within your club and get them to a session to show this player or show your players how to do that Cruyff turn. There's a number of ways. A willingness to get better for the players, but for us as coaches, I think I said at the start, we've got to accept sometimes we're not perfect. We have to, of course we do. No one's perfect. So we're never going to deliver the perfect session. That's impossible. We can strive for it, but I think it's pretty impossible to reach that. So let's try and get as close as we can. But you've got to want to get that close. You've got to want to get better. Commitment comes across a number of things. I don't need to go into too much detail, but commitment might be going on coaching courses to get better. Commitment might be jumping on this call to hear, what I've got to say, and hopefully one or two things can ring true and you can take them away. We're leaders in the game. So let's make sure, everything that we do is led by example. I think this is another big one. People who want to inspire others. If I'm a coach, I've got to want to inspire the players. I've got to want to inspire probably the parents too, because they're trusting me with their son or daughter, their pride and joy. So if you don't inspire them, then they're probably not going to stay there long. So that's massively important. And then the last thing is energizers. We used to have this thing at Man City, which is brilliant. One of the old bosses that I used to have, there was energizers, and then there was energy zappers, and I thought it was great. But I'd rather be around energizers. I'd rather be in the room with energizers. I'd rather be on the pitch with energizers, people who make me feel, excited, enjoying the game, rather than energy zappers. There's nothing worse than them. They zap the life out of you. You don't want to be around them. They bore you. Those sort of people and players as well, you'll see them. They're not the ones you want. Things we don't need. I don't need to go through them. But being late, disorganized, people who don't want to improve, and lone wolves as well. By lone wolves, I mean people who just go off on their own tangent and just kind of do it without, having conversations with the right people and who that is. So, yeah. I'll finish on 1v1s because I'm conscious that my alarm's gonna go off again. But yeah, just to round off with the 1v1s, there was 3 points I wanted to make, because again, this could be a whole separate session. But there's two parts to a game of football, two parts to a game of soccer. It is as simple as attacking and defending. Now, the importance of a 1v1 and why for me it's really important, and it's a staple in a number of our younger sessions, the foundation phase and the pre-academy to some extent, is because it gives those players a realistic approach to the game of soccer. Rather than, like I mentioned before, I've seen them before, passing patterns, loads of stuff, which is what we'd refer to as unopposed, where there's no pressure from a defender or pressure from a real life figure. In a 1v1, it's me against you, and it's a battle. You're going to lose or you're going to win. I'm going to lose or I'm going to win. There's a winner and a loser. So that excites me straight away as a kid. I want to win. Okay. The second thing is, it's a battle. I like a bit of a physical battle. So, we're going to get stuck in. We'll see what happens. And then secondly, if there's a goal involved in that 1v1, I've got a chance of scoring too. This is fantastic. So there are a number of thousands of different ways to incorporate these 1v1s. Could be as simple as a couple of gates. You play a pass in and away you go, close them down. But then we start to delve into the more technical details, which we haven't got time for. But pressure from the side, pressure from the front, pressure from behind. Where is that pressure coming from the defender? How do I react when I've got the ball? How do I react when I don't have the ball? And there's a number of, as I say, variables involved here, but it's a superb way, especially at those younger age groups, you know, like I said before, the pre-academy and foundation phase, to get that almost that dedication and that aggression within the game into the players early. Because again, we're at this day and age now where a number of players or kids are sitting at home on the PlayStation or their Xbox, and it's certainly not what it's like when I was growing up. Be out on the street until probably 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, and my mum would come outside and grab me by the ear and drag me in the house. Do you know what I mean? That completely different culture, you know, these days. So if we can almost create that street soccer culture within the environment we work in, it's only gonna benefit. And then the last thing I think was just to mention was, it's a great. I know from my time over on that side of the world, the athleticism I found in a number of certainly our players in Canada that we had that went on to be successful and represent the province and actually the national team, the youth national teams. They were athletic first and foremost. If you've got players who aren't athletic, you know, having 1v1s, you know, it's gonna improve them, because it's hidden fitness for those players. They without them really knowing, they're in a battle, but they're running, and it's a million times better than just running in a straight line or doing the bleep test or whatever. It serves a real good purpose. So that's something I would certainly have a think about. And lastly, just before the wrap up, we do a Q&A. I'm not trying to sell a 1v1 program by any stretch of the imagination. This is just through the experience I've had. So listen, I'll stop rambling, Paige. I've just had to snooze my alarm for the second time. So I hope I haven't put anyone to sleep. So yeah.
No, Liam, that was brilliant. Thanks so much. And I mean, I've even, you know, wrote a few points down there that can help me. So I'm sure the people on the call here can, you know, definitely take away a couple of things. So I really appreciate that. So we've got about 10 minutes left before we wrap up. There are a few questions coming in the chat box, which Liam, you've got access to, so you can have a little look. Alan's just put here, if you start a training session with a scrimmage, how do you then transition to a drill without losing the enthusiasm or attention?
It's a great question. So in terms of how I would set it up, like I said before, it was a 3v3 for our under 7s and under 8s. So it's a mini game, and it's got within that game, and I didn't mention this before, when the players arrive, whatever that topic is has to come out within the game. So the topic for that week might be, let's say it's dribbling. Maybe that topic that week's dribbling. So within that game that they're playing 3v3, there might not be a goal involved in that 3v3. It might be that they've got to dribble across the line. So in effect, they're playing a mini scrimmage, if you will, but to the sense that they're already intense, they're already at it. Now, when you go into the session, I don't know how you guys structure your sessions, but I think from our side, certainly my side, when I'm structuring a session, we start high intense anyway. You know, the kids arrive at those younger age groups, 7 and 8 years old. They're excited. They don't need to be stretching. You know, they don't need to be doing static stretching or any of that stuff. You know, they play the games and they go straight into the session. I always make sure that hour that they've got with me is high intense anyway, so that there's no drop for me with the 7s and 8s. Now, depending on what age group you're talking about, if you're talking about, 14, 15 or something of those age groups, then I wouldn't start with a scrimmage, because like you've kind of mentioned there, it's going to be difficult to get them back on side, because you might have to go into a passing pattern, or you might have to do a little bit of shape that week. So going high intense, then dropping, then trying to get back up again is going to be difficult. But for the purpose of the under 7s and the under 8s that I work with, they're like Energizer bunnies. They turn up, they play. they go and get a drink, right? The next stage has to be high intense. So we make sure, and my coaches with us, with those groups, make sure we just don't drop the level. So for the purpose of under 7s and 8s, we have that scrimmage, if you will. And then we kind of go into 1v1s. It might be 1v1s for the next 20 minutes. It might then be dribbling to goal with a couple of defenders, 1v2 maybe. So that's all game realistic at those U7 and U8 age groups. So hopefully that makes sense for those age groups. There is no real drop off in intensity, or there shouldn't be. It should just be a buzzing 60 minutes. But like I say, just to reiterate, at those older age groups, if they're 13, 14, 15 turning up and they've got a game, it's going to be really difficult to bring them back to life when you go into the session. So I wouldn't have usually started with the older age groups. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Liam. I think just to add to that, there's different coaching, methods, and over here, Mass Youth Soccer's sort of our provider. And there are different ways of coaching, there isn't just one way. I think Liam and I, have been through enough coach education courses and people on the call to see this, play, practice, play, whole part, whole. There's all different ways of sort of setting your session. And I think right now in the club, we haven't quite got there in terms of developing, that level, but we are going to get there. And I think right now it's just about, can you go in with a structure? If it is a scrimmage at the start, then that scrimmage, like Liam said, has to be related to the topic. And then sort of the middle piece would be the training, how to fix that problem. Maybe, you're having struggles with switching the ball. So you start with a game, a scrimmage that looks at maybe switch and play. And then the middle part of your session there would be something like, how can we switch the play? It goes in more of a coaching session. And then again, you finish with a game. So I think that's a great point Liam made. And and these questions are coming in thick and fast. So another one here, Liam. How would you, and again, we don't want to spend too much time on it. So, if there's anything that you can send to me to pass on, that'd be great. But how would you look to set up 1v1s? So maybe give us an example of a situation where you think it could be successful.
Yeah, so there's a number of ways. So it might be something as simple as a little box, if you will, a little box with a cone either side. There's a player at each side, and then there's two gates, a gate either side. Player 1 plays the player 2. It's difficult to show you with my fingers, but player A plays the player B, and then player B drives out. They've got an option to go left through the gate or right through the gate. To go through the gate, they get a point, but they're obviously going to receive pressure from the front. So that player who's driving at them, who's passed them the ball, is now defending, has got to stop them. If they win the ball back, if that defender wins the ball back, then they can attack through either gate 1 or gate 2, left or right. So that would just be one short example. There's so many. What I would recommend is, I think they're probably out in the US quite a lot anyway, but I know, is it Curver or Cover? I think they do quite a lot of stuff online. So if you type them in, COERVER, they're like a Dutch firm. They deliver lots of 1v1. Some of them are brilliant, some of them are shocking. But you find what's good for you. But I'd certainly do that. What I should do, Paige, is I should probably come over and deliver a few 1v1 sessions. Then you've got a visual, then, haven't you?
I think that would be. We'd love to have you over, Liam. But just also to remind any of our coaches that are here from Arlington, obviously we've just teamed up with the coaching manual, and that has got an abundance of sessions, 1v1s, 2v1s, and then obviously any other topic that you're looking at. So I'd definitely point you in the right direction to go and take a look at the coaching manual. Thanks for that, Liam. So another question here: how do you ensure a safe environment? What should coaches look out for so things are safe as possible? A little bit off topic in terms of what today's meeting was about, but always a good one to sort of mention and bring up. So what would you look for, Liam, as you are entering the field there to make sure it's safe?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as, obviously it depends what you train, doesn't it? But obviously the initial one's going to be the pitch inspection. Make sure your area is clear and tidy and there's nothing around. So a number of clubs I know will use public spaces. So if you're using a public space, that's an initial red flag for me, in the sense that you should be checking what part of the pitch you're using and give it a little scan over, proper thorough look. When you're in the session, I just think it's simple things like if you're going to deliver and commit your time for that 60 minutes, that hour long session, you should have a stopwatch and really put your phone on vibrate and keep it in your pocket, because that's a hazard for me if you're checking your phone constantly, because when you check your phone, you instantly put your head down and look at the phone. As soon as you do that, a split second, a kid runs into someone, especially if you're doing 1v1s or mini games. Yeah, they're going to bang heads and you've missed it. Now, how can you possibly, how can you explain what's happened there? So there's a straight one for you. Keep trying to put your phone for that hour, just put it away, put it on vibrate if you're waiting for an emergency call, and I understand that, but other than that, keep it away. Other things that I think about, just watch the session. I know you might have a lot of kids, but position yourself where you can see everything. It is possible to see everything if you stay on the move and give yourself decent angles to watch what's happening. I think it is down to you, and it is quite easy to do, but I think you have to think about your area and where you stand.
Yeah, I think they're good points. And obviously, just to state the obvious, having a first aid kit on hand, ice packs, and then obviously going through all the credentials that you need. Safe sport, and these sort of qualifications that you have to have, especially through Arlington. They sort of provide you all the safety, sort of tips and knowledge that you need to hopefully have a successful season. But listen, things happen on the field, we know that, but it's how prepared you are to sort of handle and deal with that. We'll go for a couple more questions. I think we've got 2 more. Can you talk about when the balance of the focus transitions more to playing to win? I'm having trouble letting go of equal playing time and a full rotation of positions from the younger age groups.
Great question. What have we got? Another half an hour, have we, Paige? So for that one, it's my answer is not going to be the right answer. No, I don't think there is a right answer. I think people are still trying to find that balance, to be honest. The transition from playing to win, it depends on, for me, I found, depends on club to club. I think, like I said before, the foundation phase from U7 to U11, I think if you focus on development and fair game time in that area, you can't go too far wrong, to be honest. And the reason I say that is, clubs in Europe at the highest end and at the grassroots level and recreational level, that's what they're doing. So I think if they're doing it, then following suit, you're probably not too far off it. As soon as you get into the YDP, the youth development phase, under 12s upwards, I think you then start to talk about merit in terms of game time. So I think U12s, you could probably talk about that being on the cusp of the foundation phase, U11 into U12. But I think certainly U13, you can then start talking about merit, maybe turning up to training. But I'd still look to, you want to be hitting 75% game time. I don't know how big your squad is, the person who's asked the question. But I'm a massive advocate for having a small squad. Again, that divides opinion because people will say, well, you get players injured, you get suspensions, whatever it be. But for me, that's why you have teams younger than you, because you can give them an opportunity to call them up and fill a space. So having a smaller squad for me is a big thing. But it's a grey area, I would say. I think as soon as you get to U15, U14, U15, you're probably talking about transitioning, your game time is based on merit, and you then start talking about, a little bit more about winning games. Do you talk about winning games at the younger age groups? Of course you do. Anyone who says they don't, are probably lying to you, to be honest. But it's how you do it and the way you do it. That, in my opinion, anyway.
And I'll just sort of jump on the back of that. Obviously, at our club, Liam, it is equal playing time, and I think the older you get, the players, think about winning. It's more important, I guess. Well, I say more important, but they sort of understand the game a bit more. They realise, and they maybe they're playing against the team, that friends from school, and it becomes a little bit more of a pressured environment if you're getting beat every week. So I do understand that from a coach's point of view. I think it goes without saying though. Regardless if you win or lose, there still should be success, which is, if you can find other ways of, educating your kids on or your players on, winning isn't just scoring more goals than the other team. You can win in different ways, things you've worked on in practice, and if that's shown in the game, then that's something that the kids, and again, it's about the education and the relationship that you've got with those players. Do they trust you when you say this, or does it sound like it's a throwaway comment because we got beat again? If they have that understanding in training that these are our 3 goals of this season. Now, if we can accomplish these 3 goals in every game, then that is winning. Doesn't matter if we're not physically winning by scoring more goals. So I think, equal time is something that we're big on at Arlington Soccer Club. And I think it's important that even if there are players who, may be not up to standards with the best 2-3 players, we can talk a lot more about, relative age effect, and we won't go into too much detail on relative age effect, but players will progress at different stages of their development and growth. So I think it's super important as coaches that we sort of keep our coaching cap on, do the best for everybody, and sort of try and find different ways of finding success. But good question. We've got one more. Do you talk to your pre-game warm-up / routine that you use with your teams? Mark, I know you asked that. If you want to come off mute, Mark, and maybe just, a little bit more about that question. I'm not sure, but Liam, you may understand that and I can answer that. I'm not sure exactly what Mark is necessary.
Let's get Mark on. Come on, Mark, what have you got?
Yeah, sorry about that. Maybe my English was too American, but yeah. So just, can you talk about a little bit about your pregame ritual, or what do you do with the kids or the team to get them focused, and how much energy do you put into that to kind of get them ready for the game?
Yeah, just quickly, Mark, what age group are you bothered? What age? I was going to talk young, old, what sort of age group?
Right now I'm working with 12-year-old girls.
Brilliant. Okay, brilliant. So I think, 12-year-old girls, I think that's when we arrive. I think I certainly with our U12 girls will give them a little bit of spare time to have a little chit chat. They get the shin pads on, get themselves sorted, give them that little 10-minute grace period just to get themselves kind of in game mode, if you will. I will always, with the teams that I work with, have usually the structured pre-match warm-up that they all understand. So, and I wouldn't waver from that pre-match warm-up, just so that any player that comes in, whether they get called up or whatever that be, or maybe they play down that week, they all understand exactly what's expected of them. So initially, they'll turn up. Maybe we usually do a couple of, at that age, a little bit of dynamic stretches, more so for good habits more than anything. So some dynamic stretches for probably 4 or 5 minutes, and some little movements, burst of movements, lunges and whatever. We're lucky enough in the club that we're at that we've got the bands as well. We use the bands before the game. I don't know whether you've got them at your club, but they're quite handy as well. Good habits more than anything for that age group. And then to be honest, the footballs are out. It might be a little passing pattern, maybe a little dribbling pattern, just to get them feeling the ball. And then we probably get into the box and do a little bit of possession based on the level of ability that you've got. I would also as well maybe have a little mini game before the actual game. And the reason being is, if they're high intense just before kickoff, there's no real excuse then for when that whistle goes for them to be slow starters to a game. I think it's quite easy for you to do your warm up, your pre-match, then go and talk to the players for 5 minutes, and then they start the game slow for 5 minutes, and you wonder why they're starting slow. Well, they're starting slow quite likely because they've been standing still listening for the last 5 minutes. So I think your message, and this goes back last week. I had an unbelievable experience with a professional club that were over visiting, and their manager, he's working at the highest level of the game, and at half time, at the end of a game, and pre-match as well, he just gives his players 2 pointers, point 1 and point 2, and that's all. Because he's understood over his time that, a lot of players can't digest that much information, especially before a game when they're nervous and thinking about performance. So I was doing 3 or 4 up until 2 weeks ago. I've now dulled it down as of last weekend to 2 points, and we'll see over time whether that works for me. But that's certainly something I would look at as well, Mark.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, Liam, I think we are going to come to a close. Again, it's been fantastic having you on. I know a lot of people on this call have definitely would have taken some pointers, and hopefully they can put that into their training sessions in the next week or so. So I really appreciate your time. I think I'm going to hold you to that. I might get you over here for a few masterclass sessions in Arlington. We'd love to have you here. And yeah, thanks so much. So appreciate it. And just as a heads up, everyone, our next call Our next webinar, coaches webinar, will be with a friend of mine and Liam's, Martin Ho, who's currently the assistant manager at Manchester United Women. He'll be on April 29th. So Liam, thanks so much. And